Back here in Madison, dozens of people gathered on the steps of the Capitol this afternoon for a rally marking the 3-year anniversary of the war in Ukraine. The event set out to reflect on the last 3 years and honor those who have lost their lives fighting in the war. Through speeches, music, and coming together, Ukrainian community members and supporters celebrated Ukrainian resilience while holding space for reflection, support, and solidarity. Organizers also emphasized the importance of Ukrainians remaining seen in their community.
We come together to remember the bravery of the Ukrainian people, the resilience of those who fought against this aggression, and the unwavering spirit of a nation that refuses to stay silent. This should be a solemn moment, a time of unity and remembrance.
The group also walked around the Capitol with Ukrainian flags and colors, emphasizing the importance of Ukrainian people and ideas remaining visible. This Monday, February 24th, marks the 3-year of the start of the war.